the table, my brother said, "Your kid will never be anything but average. Be happy if he finishes high school." The room laughed. My 8-year-old stared at his food. I said, "Then I'll stop paying for your daughter's after-school program." My brother blinked. My mom whispered, "Don't do this here." But I kept going, because for the last 14 months, I'd been quietly covering $380 a month for my niece's STEM program, plus their car insurance when Dan forgot to pay it, plus groceries when their EBT ran out. I'm a single mom working in tech. Dan's been between jobs for over a year, and I thought family meant something. So when he decided dinner was the perfect time to humiliate my son Jordan in front of everyone, I was done protecting his ego. I pulled out my phone right there, opened my banking app, showed everyone the Venmo history, every transfer to Dan and his wife Carly over the past year. The room went silent. My sister-in-law turned pale. Dan's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. I looked at Jordan, still staring at his lasagna, and we left. 3 days later, Dan texted, "Really classy, Amanda. Real mature. No apology." Like I was the villain. I didn't respond. A week later, my mom called, said my niece got pulled from her STEM program. She said it like I'd burned their house down. I told her I was done helping people who mock my son to his face. She hung up. Turns out that program was the centerpiece of my niece's private school scholarship application. She'd already done the interview. Her parents told her she was a lock. Without that program listed, her application got rejected. Carly called me crying, said I ruined everything. I said, maybe Dan should have thought about that before he opened his mouth. Then Dan went full high school on Facebook, posted some vague rant about family members who get money and think they're better than everyone. What he didn't expect, people started commenting. Our cousin wrote, "Is this about Amanda? Didn't she pay your car insurance last winter?" Then Uncle Roy mentioned a loan Dan never paid back. Then someone from Dan's old job posted that Dan borrowed $800 2 years ago and ghosted him. The post got deleted that night, but the damage was done. They had to cancel their Disney trip. Dan sold their PS5. Carly picked up extra shifts. Then Dan's car got booted. Insurance had lapsed again. Meanwhile, I signed Jordan up for the robotics club he'd been nervous about. Bought him a used 3D printer from Craigslist. We started building a Mars rover together. One night, Jordan asked if what Uncle Dan said was true. If he was just average. I told him no. He was exceptional. Not because he was smart, but because he was thoughtful, curious, and kind. 2 weeks after that dinner, Carly was working 6 days a week. My niece spent hours alone while Dan looked for work, which based on his STEAM achievements wasn't going well. Then Jordan came home with a drawing for a family pride project. Other kids drew houses and pets. Jordan drew us standing on a hill. Below us were 4 dark shadows with no faces. I asked what they were. He said, "The people who laugh at us." That night I cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't see. Days later, Dan called. Asked if we could talk in person. Something in his voice stopped me, not anger, just exhaustion. We met at a diner. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Jordan's drawing. "I found this in my daughter's backpack," he said. "She took it from your kitchen." When I saw it, I finally saw myself clearly. He asked if he could apologize to Jordan in person. Dan showed up at 7. Jordan was doing math homework. Dan walked over. "I said something that hurt you. I was wrong. You're nothing like what I said. You're smart and brave, and you're exactly who I wish I was at your age." Jordan didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Okay," and went back to his math. 2 days later, Dan had started working night shifts at a warehouse. Then Carly told me he picked up deliveries on a borrowed bike. One evening, we saw Dan on the sidewalk with a grocery bag, helmet on, wiping sweat off his face. Jordan watched him. Then he said, "Uncle Dan looks different." I said, "He is." The next week, Carly called. "Something's changing," she said. "He sold his gaming rig, picked up extra shifts. He signed up for HVAC recertification. He asked if I'd work less so he could take over evenings with our daughter. Said it was time he stepped up as a dad." That weekend, Dan showed up with his daughter. They brought the Lego kit I'd given her with an expansion set he bought with his first delivery tips. The kids sat building for over an hour. Dan asked if he could come to Jordan's robotics finals. The day of the competition, Dan showed up early, brought a crooked sign that said, "Go Jordan," in thick blue marker. Jordan spotted it and just stood there, stunned. After the event, Jordan walked up to Dan. He said, "Thanks for being here." Dan said, "Thanks for letting me." By summer, Dan had passed his HVAC certification. He was working full-time between 2 jobs and still made time for both kids. One weekend, we ended up at my mom's house again. First time since that dinner. Same table, same lasagna. Midway through dinner, Dan raised his glass. Just water. I wasn't proud of who I was, but I'm trying to be someone Jordan and my daughter can look up to. And I wouldn't have gotten there if Amanda hadn't stood up when she did. Nobody clapped. It was just quiet, honest. Later, Jordan walked up while I was packing leftovers. He said, "Uncle Dan's kind of awesome now." I smiled. "Yeah, he kind of is."